Welcome to my channel. Today I will tell you about an unusual place. King Arthur and his wife Guinevere were buried on this hill. In 1191, monks of Glastonbury Abbey allegedly found sarcophagi with their remains. This is not the only legend about St. Michael's Hill and King Arthur. Perhaps these are just myths, but visitors to the landmark claim that the hill has powerful energy. What is the legend of St. Michael's Hill and King Arthur in Glastonbury Abbey? And what are the myths about this place? In the southwest of England, in the county of Somerset, there is a place that has attracted pilgrims, seekers of wonders and lovers of secrets for centuries. This is Glastonbury Hill, crowned by St. Michael's Tower. Today, tourists from all over the world come here. They climb the path leading to the top and see only the remains of an old stone tower. But if you stay here a little longer, listen to the wind, your heart begins to beat faster. There are so many legends associated with the hill that it seems not just a part of the earth, but a gateway to another world. Monks, crusaders, travelers and old Celtic legends spoke of it. Myth and reality, history and fairy tale, faith and fear come together here. Many believe that this is the place where the most famous of British rulers, King Arthur, rests, and with him his faithful wife Guinevere. Legend has it that in 1191, the monks of Glastonbury Abbey excavated 2 graves on the hill. In them, they found sarcophagi with bones of extraordinary size. Nearby lay a plaque with the inscription, "Here lies the glorious King Arthur and his Queen Guinevere." The rumor of the discovery flew around all of England. For believers, this became a confirmation of ancient legends. For skeptics, it was just a trick of the monks who wanted to attract pilgrims and donations to the monastery. But Arthur's secret did not become less mysterious. Since then, St. Michael's Hill has become a special place. Some believe that it is here that the gates to the underground kingdom of Avalon are located, where Arthur went after his death. Others say that the Knights of the Round Table still slumber in the dungeons of the hill, waiting for the hour when Britain will again be in danger. And everyone who has ever climbed to the top of the hill admits, the air there is different. It is thick, vibrating, filled with invisible energy. Even an ordinary person, far from mysticism, feels that the place is alive. There are many myths associated with the hill. Some claim that in ancient times there was a lake here, and the hill was an island among the waters. This was the mythical Avalon, the island of apples, the place of eternal youth. Others claim that underground passages leading to other worlds are hidden under the hill. And still others say that Archangel Michael himself descended here to protect people from darkness, and since then the tower on the top has become a symbol of the struggle between light and darkness. But the most mysterious and most attractive legend is associated with Arthur. There is a belief, if you stand on the top of the hill on a full moon night and listen to the whisper of the wind, you can hear the distant ringing of swords and the voices of knights. And sometimes some people see torchlight moving through the darkness. They say it's the souls of fallen knights guarding the peace of their king. Glastonbury is more than just a dot on the map. It's a place where the line between past and present becomes thinner than a spider's web. And maybe that's why people return here every year, hoping to touch an ancient secret. Long before the monks of Glastonbury claimed to uncover the bones of Arthur and Guinevere, the hill itself was already a place of legend. Locals whispered that in ancient times, the land around the tor was not fields and meadows, but water. The hill rose like an island from the misty lake, surrounded by orchards heavy with fruit. This was Avalon, the island of apples, a place of eternal youth, healing, and secrets too old for men to grasp. The name Avalon itself meant more than geography. It was a promise, a realm between worlds, where the wounded could be healed, and where heroes who had not yet finished their journey could find rest until the world called them back. And at the heart of every version of the tale stood Arthur, the once and future king. Stories tell us that after his final battle, when his body was broken and bloodied, Arthur did not die as an ordinary man would. He was carried across the waters to Avalon, to be tended by enchantresses and hidden from mortal eyes. His sword, Excalibur, returned to the lake, its blade disappearing beneath the ripples. Yet the promise remained, Arthur would rise again when his people needed him most. And where better to imagine this sacred resting place than Glastonbury? The orchards around the abbey, the hill rising out of the mist, the strange energy that clings to the earth, it all matched the old Celtic songs and druidic whispers. Even Christian monks, sworn to God, found it convenient to weave the tale of Avalon into their faith. By claiming Arthur's grave, they tied Britain's most powerful legend to their holy ground. But there is more to the story. Avalon was not only a place of healing. It was a place of magic, ruled, some say by Morgan Le Fay, Arthur's half-sister, feared and revered as both healer and sorceress. To the villagers, Morgan was not just a figure of myth. She was an explanation. Strange lights that flickered over the tor at night. That was Morgan's fire. Sudden storms sweeping the hilltop. Morgan's hand. A man wandering too far into the mists and never returning. Morgan had called him into Avalon, and he was lost forever. Even today, people swear the hill breathes. Travelers who sleep near the tor tell of vivid dreams, visions of knights in armor, of women with crowns of flowers and eyes that shine like the moon. Some wake with tears in their eyes, claiming they had stood at the gates of Avalon itself, just for a moment, before the dream dissolved into dawn. And yet, beneath the beauty of the story lies something darker. If Avalon truly lies beneath the hill, then it is not just a paradise. It is a prison. Arthur and his knights, bound by destiny, unable to rest in peace, waiting endlessly in the hollow earth. Waiting for the horn to sound, for the land to bleed once more, for the call of war to summon them from their slumber. Glastonbury Tor stands silent above the fields. But in that silence, some say, you can hear the faint clash of steel, carried on the wind. The legend lives, and it is heavy with both wonder and unease. Some wake with tears in their eyes, claiming they had stood at the gates of Avalon itself, just for a moment, before the dream dissolved into dawn. And yet, beneath the beauty of the story lies something darker. If Avalon truly lies beneath the hill, then it is not just a paradise. It is a prison. Arthur and his knights, bound by destiny, unable to rest in peace, waiting endlessly in the hollow earth. Waiting for the horn to sound, for the land to bleed once more, for the call of war to summon them from their slumber. Glastonbury Tor stands silent above the fields. But in that silence, some say, you can hear the faint clash of steel, carried on the wind. The legend lives, and it is heavy with both wonder and unease. The year was 1191. The monks of Glastonbury Abbey were facing hard times. Fires had ravaged their buildings, pilgrims were scarce, and gold was harder to find with each passing year. And then, as if by divine providence, or by cunning design, a discovery was made that would change the abbey forever. They claimed to have found a grave. Not just any grave, but a tomb deep beneath the ground, hidden between two ancient oak trees that no longer stood. Inside, they said, were two coffins. One held the bones of a tall, noble man. The other, the delicate remains of a woman. A lead cross was said to have been buried with them, scratched with Latin words that named the man. Here lies the famous King Arthur, buried with his wife Guinevere, in the Isle of Avalon. Imagine it, the most powerful legend of Britain, solved with a shovel and a prayer. The monks wasted no time in spreading the word. Pilgrims began to arrive in droves, eager to see where the great king lay. Donations filled the abbey's coffers, and Glastonbury rose from its ashes, fueled by the promise of a connection to Arthur himself. But not everyone believed. Skeptics asked, why had the grave been found only when the abbey most needed wealth? Why was the cross inscribed in a script that looked suspiciously new? And how could Avalon, a place of myth and mist, suddenly be reduced to a coffin in the earth? Still, the power of belief is stronger than doubt. For many, the discovery confirmed what they had long hoped, that Arthur was real, that his queen had lived and died at his side, and that Avalon was not just a dream. The site became holy, charged with mystery, and woven tighter into the soul of the land. Yet the discovery also shifted the story in subtle, dangerous ways. If Arthur's bones lay in Glastonbury, then perhaps the promise of his return was a lie. Perhaps the once and future king had no future at all. To those who had prayed for Arthur's return in times of strife, this was a bitter pill. And so another legend rose to balance the first. Yes, Arthur's body was found. But his spirit? His spirit remained in Avalon, deep beneath the hill, waiting. The bones were a shell, a trick for mortal eyes. The king's true essence still lingered in the hollow heart of Glastonbury Tor, guarded by the mists, by Morgan, by the very breath of the land. And even now, as you walk the winding path to the summit, where the tower of St. Michael stands against the sky, you may feel it, a weight in the air, a vibration under your feet, as if the hill itself remembers. Some say the monks unearthed more than bones that day. They disturbed something ancient, something that did not wish to be named. The grave they claimed to find was not an ending. It was a warning. They say that Glastonbury Tor is not merely a hill. It is a gateway. To some, it is a mound of green earth crowned with the crumbling tower of St. Michael's Church, open to the sky and the endless winds. To others, it is a veil, thin as a breath between this world and one far older, far darker, and far more radiant. Legends claim that beneath the hill, there are caverns that twist like arteries through the body of the earth. Monks once whispered that these tunnels were not carved by men at all, but by the footsteps of beings who walked here long before the abbey was raised. Some believed those caverns led directly to Avalon, the Isle of Apple Trees, eternal youth, and the sleeping king who waits to rise again. Others said they led somewhere much colder. In the winter of 1191, when the monks unearthed the graves they declared to be Arthur and Guinevere, the people of Glastonbury gathered at the foot of the Tor, candles flickering in the frost. The monks swore they had found bones of giants, a cross etched with the name Arthur, and a tomb that smelled of ancient cedar wood. Some bowed their heads in reverence, believing at last that the king who had fought Saxons and woven the dream of Camelot had been found. Others turned pale, whispering that disturbing such a grave would bring a curse. For if Arthur slept in Avalon, then who had they unearthed? Centuries passed, and the Tor remained. Shepherds led their flocks across its slopes, pilgrims climbed barefoot to the tower at dawn, and travelers swore that the wind atop the hill carried voices not their own. Some said they heard hymns, sung in languages long forgotten. Others swore they heard the clash of steel, the cries of dying men, and the thunder of horses, echoes of Arthur's last battle on the plain of Camlan. But there was one story the monks rarely told, even to each other. A tale of a brother who stayed too long on the hill one storm-tossed night. He was a quiet man, a keeper of relics, tasked with guarding what had been unearthed. One evening, he climbed to St. Michael's tower to pray, for the wind was howling and the abbey walls trembled. Hours passed. The storm grew worse. When the monks went searching, they found his rosary beads at the foot of the tower, but no trace of him. Only a hollow in the ground, damp and smelling of cedar wood, as if the earth had swallowed him whole. From that day, they believed the hill demanded offerings. Not sacrifices of blood, but of presence. The Tor would sometimes claim a wanderer, a pilgrim, a hermit, a foolhardy youth, and in exchange, the abbey thrived. Crops grew, pilgrims arrived, and donations filled their coffers. The monks never admitted this bargain, but the silence in their eyes spoke louder than words. And always, behind the tower, the earth hummed. Travelers who pressed their ears to the stones swore they could hear a heartbeat beneath the ground. Some said it was Arthur, dreaming of return. Others said it was not Arthur at all, but something that wore his memory like a mask, waiting for the day when men's belief would be strong enough to pull it back into the world. Even today, those who climb the Tor speak of the unease that settles in their bones as the sky darkens. Phones lose signal, compasses spin, and footsteps seem to echo though no one follows. Couples who go up together sometimes return separately, each swearing the other vanished for hours, though no time has passed. And some pilgrims never return at all. What is Glastonbury Tor? A burial ground? A stage for myths? A fracture in the skin of the world where something older breathes through? No one can say. But on nights when the moon hangs low and the tower cuts a black silhouette against the stars, locals bolt their windows and whisper an old prayer. Because they know the Tor is listening. And sometimes, it whispers back. By the 14th century, whispers of Glastonbury's secret had spread far beyond the abbey walls. Pilgrims came not only from England, but from France, Spain, and even the northern lands of ice, all drawn by the rumor that King Arthur did not die, but merely sleeps. The monks of Glastonbury grew wealthy on these stories, but behind their stone cloisters, another tale was quietly guarded, a tale not meant for common ears. There was said to be an order of brothers within the abbey, men who did not take vows of silence or poverty, but of secrecy. They were called custodes somni regis, the keepers of the king's sleep. Their duty was not to pray for Arthur, nor to glorify his memory, but to ensure that his rest was never disturbed. For the legend told that if Arthur were awakened before his hour, he would not rise as a savior, but as something twisted by centuries of dreaming. In the dusty archives of Oxford, a letter survives. Written in Latin, its ink faded and edges burned, it speaks of a night in 1345 when the earth beneath Glastonbury Tor trembled. A farmer claimed the ground split open and light poured out, white as lightning but silent as snowfall. He swore he saw knights in ghostly armor riding in circles around the hill, their swords glowing like embers. By morning, the ground was whole again, but every sheep in the farmer's flock lay dead, their eyes wide with terror. The abbey denied this, of course. But travelers continued to whisper that strange lights flickered over the Tor, that shadows stretched against the wind, and that the tower's bells sometimes tolled though no hand pulled the rope. Centuries passed. The abbey fell to ruin under Henry VIII's fury, and yet the hill remained untouched, as if no king dared claim it. Locals said the keepers of the king never disappeared, only went underground, disguising themselves in guilds, lodges, and later in scholarly societies. Always watching. Always guarding. In the 19th century, when Victorian explorers rediscovered the myths of Arthur, a professor named Edward Lanchester climbed the Tor with his students. He carried journals, maps, and a silver compass, determined to prove that the hill was no more than geology wrapped in superstition. His students later testified that as the professor stood within the ruins of St. Michael's Tower, he stopped speaking mid-sentence, his eyes glazed, and he walked to the edge of the hill as if sleepwalking. They shouted, grabbed at his coat, but he slipped free, stepped into the air, and fell. His body was never found at the base. Only his compass, lying in the grass, its needle spinning wildly. And then, the modern stories began. Hikers in the 1970s spoke of hearing horns in the night, long, mournful blasts that rolled through the valley though no human lips could have made them. In the 1990s, a group of tourists claimed to see a man in ancient armor standing in the tower arch. He looked at them, raised his sword, and vanished into the mist. Police dismissed it as imagination, but when the photos from that night were developed, one frame showed something impossible, a figure of iron and shadow, taller than any man, with no face under his helm. Today, the legend still thrives. Some climb the Tor to feel peace, others to feel power. Yet, those who linger after midnight whisper of footsteps that circle them, though the grass lies undisturbed. They speak of voices carried on the wind, not English, but something older, harsher, like stone grinding on stone. And sometimes, they hear a single word clearly: Arthur. Is he really there, beneath the hill, waiting? Or is it something else, something that wears his name, feeding on belief, growing stronger with each story told? The keepers say he must not be woken. But what if the world, with its wars and hunger for heroes, calls him back anyway? And if he does return, will he come as a king, or as a nightmare? In 2003, a team of archaeologists received a quiet grant from a London foundation. Officially, they were tasked with mapping medieval monastic activity in Somerset. Unofficially, they were given one order: dig beneath Glastonbury Tor, but speak of nothing they found unless told otherwise. The leader of the project was Dr. Amelia Cross, a brilliant but skeptical woman who believed myths were nothing more than cultural wallpaper. To her, Arthur was no more real than Robin Hood. The Tor, she thought, was a mound of soil wrapped in centuries of storytelling. But her team was professional, her funding generous, and she intended to deliver results. They set up camp on the northern slope, where old records hinted at hidden tunnels leading into the hill. For weeks, they worked through rain and mud, cutting into the earth, brushing away centuries. By the third month, they uncovered what appeared to be a sealed stone archway, buried beneath layers of rubble. The stones were carved with symbols, spirals, suns, and strange marks that looked almost like runes but older, more primal. When they pried the stones loose, the air that hissed out was not stale. It was sweet, metallic, and warm, as if the hill itself exhaled. Inside, they found a chamber. The walls were blackened as though by fire, yet the carvings glowed faintly when light touched them, as if painted with dust of stars. At the center of the chamber lay a slab of rock shaped like a coffin lid, covered in iron bands. Across it was carved one word, deep and jagged: REX. The team was electrified. Had they found Arthur? The discovery could change history. Dr. Cross wanted to open the slab immediately, but her second-in-command, a quiet Welshman named Gareth, went pale. He refused to touch it. He said the word didn't mean just king. In the dialect of his ancestors, it meant the king who waits. That night, their cameras malfunctioned. Batteries drained. The air inside the chamber grew heavy, pressing on their chests. One student swore he heard hoofbeats echoing in the dark, though they were 30 feet underground. Another claimed to see a shadow standing between them and the slab, though no one else noticed. Still, Dr. Cross pushed forward. On the 5th night, against Gareth's warnings, she brought a crowbar and forced one of the iron bands loose. The sound that came from the stone was not the creak of old metal. It was a sigh. Long, deep. As if something beneath had been holding its breath for 1,000 years. 2 days later, the project was abruptly shut down. The foundation withdrew funding, the site was sealed, and every member of the team signed non-disclosure agreements under threat of ruin. Dr. Cross vanished from academia. Gareth returned to Wales and never spoke of the tour again. But stories leaked. A worker from the village pub told of researchers leaving the hill in silence, their faces ash-white, their clothes damp with sweat though the night was freezing. Another rumor said the slab was no longer in the chamber, that it had been removed under cover of darkness and taken away in an unmarked truck. And then came the strangest part. A year later, a hiker claimed to see a woman wandering near the ruins of St. Michael's Tower. She was barefoot, her hair tangled, her clothes torn, and she kept whispering one phrase over and over, "The king is dreaming, the king is dreaming, the king is dreaming." When police arrived, she was gone. To this day, no official record mentions the excavation. The government insists no such project ever happened. But those who climb the Tor at night say they sometimes hear the clink of iron bands, as though something deep in the earth still strains against them. And if you press your ear to the ground, some swear they've heard it too, the long, patient breath of something that is not quite asleep. By the mid-2010s, Glastonbury Tor had become one of England's most photographed landmarks. Tourists climbed the grassy slopes every day, snapping pictures of the ruined tower and the endless green fields below. It looked harmless, even peaceful. But locals warned that the Tor changed after dark. And they were right. The first case was brushed off as an accident. A backpacker from Germany failed to return to his hostel one October night. Police said he must have slipped on the steep hillside. Yet no body was ever found, though the search lasted weeks. His camera was recovered at the summit, lens cracked, battery drained. The last photo he took was strange, just a blur of light and shadow, as if something had moved across the frame too fast for the human eye. A year later, a British couple disappeared while stargazing. Friends told police they had hiked up the hill around midnight. Their phones pinged once near the tower, then went dead. Rescue teams found only their picnic blanket, folded neatly, as though someone had taken the time to smooth out every wrinkle. After the second disappearance, the police closed the hill at night. But that didn't stop thrill seekers. The Tor had become a dare, a challenge whispered in pubs and on forums: climb the hill after midnight. Spend 1 hour at the tower. See what happens. Most returned shaken, swearing they'd heard footsteps circling them, or voices chanting in languages they didn't know. Some reported shadows slipping between the stones, even when the moon was full and there was nowhere to hide. But a few never returned at all. The strangest account came from an American tourist named Daniel who survived his night on the Tor. He was found at dawn, stumbling barefoot through a field, clothes torn, eyes glassy with shock. At first, he couldn't speak. Later, in the hospital, he whispered his story to a nurse. He claimed that while standing near St. Michael's Tower, he saw a figure walking toward him from the far side of the hill. At first he thought it was another tourist, but the figure was too tall, its shadow stretching unnaturally long against the grass. It wore what looked like armor, but its surface shimmered like liquid, reflecting starlight. The figure stopped a few feet away. Daniel said its face was hidden by a helm, but he felt its eyes on him, heavy as iron. Then it raised a sword, not swung it, just raised it, as though in salute. The air grew cold. Daniel collapsed. When he woke, the figure was gone, and his shoes were missing. Doctors said trauma and hypothermia explained his delirium. But Daniel insisted he had seen Arthur himself. Not dead. Not resting. Waiting. Locals began whispering about the king's hour, the moment between midnight and 1 a.m. when the barrier between the living and the sleeping Arthur weakens. Some said the disappearances were sacrifices, the price of keeping him asleep. Others claimed those who vanished had been chosen to join his army, sleeping under the hill until the day of his return. And yet, despite the warnings, people still climb. They laugh at the legends in daylight, call them tourist bait. But when the sun dips and the fields drown in fog, the laughter fades. Everyone who lives in Glastonbury knows the Tor is no ordinary hill. It is a threshold one. And sometimes, if you listen carefully near the tower, you can hear footsteps that don't belong to anyone living. By the early 2000s, Glastonbury Tor wasn't just a landmark for historians and tourists. It had become a magnet for seekers of the strange, mystics, occultists, UFO hunters, even government researchers who visited quietly, avoiding questions. The idea was simple, yet terrifying. The Tor was not only the legendary resting place of King Arthur, but also a gateway. A crossroads of worlds. Dowsers came with copper rods and claimed the entire hill vibrated with energy, that invisible lines of power, what they called ley lines, intersected right under the tower. According to them, this was no accident. St. Michael's Tower had been built precisely on that spot to seal the crossing. Some whispered that medieval monks knew more than they admitted. In 2012, a group of archaeologists working near the base of the hill found something they didn't expect. Beneath layers of soil lay a series of carved stones, arranged in a circle. They weren't Roman. They weren't Celtic. Their markings didn't match any known culture. And then the strangest part, the stones emitted a faint magnetic field. Instruments malfunctioned. Compasses spun. The team's report was quietly buried. No academic journal would publish it. One of the archaeologists later admitted in a late-night interview that they were encouraged to stop digging deeper. Meanwhile, locals told their own stories. A farmer claimed his sheep refused to graze near certain slopes, as if sensing something beneath the ground. Another swore he once saw a line of blue lights drifting across the hillside, vanishing into the tower's ruined archway. But the most chilling rumors came from those who believed the Tor was a prison. According to them, Arthur wasn't the one sealed beneath the hill. No, Arthur was the warden. The one who stood watch to keep something else from breaking through. Something not human. Strange accounts multiplied. Visitors reported losing hours of time, waking from blackouts at the bottom of the hill with no memory of descending. One woman claimed she saw her own reflection in the tower's stone, but it didn't move when she did. Another man swore that as he reached the summit, he heard an army marching beneath his feet, the clash of shields and the echo of horns, as if thousands slept below, waiting. Theories spread online. Some said the Tor was an entrance to the hollow earth. Others insisted it was a beacon for beings not of this world. And a few whispered about the gatekeepers, shadowy figures who visit the Tor at night to perform rituals, ensuring the seal remains unbroken. One chilling story emerged from a group of urban explorers who hiked the hill after midnight. They filmed themselves joking, drinking, trying to provoke the ghosts of Arthur. Their camera footage was later found abandoned on the grass. The video ended with the group laughing, then freezing suddenly as a low horn sounded in the distance. The laughter turned to screams. The screen shook violently, then cut to black. None of the explorers were ever found. Today, tourists still climb the hill by daylight, snapping selfies and admiring the view. But those who study the old ways, the forgotten legends, they warn the same thing. The Tor is not just history. It is a boundary. A doorway. And the more people disturb it, the thinner that doorway becomes. Among the many legends of Glastonbury Tor, one stands above them all, the prophecy that King Arthur would return in Britain's darkest hour. To some, it was a poetic promise. To others, it was a literal warning. In the early 20th century, scholars began connecting the myth to the hill itself. They argued that if Arthur truly lay beneath the Tor, then the prophecy wasn't just folklore, it was a countdown. When the land was in danger, Arthur would rise again. But how? Through spirit? Through flesh? No one agreed. During World War II, the Tor became a strange place of activity. Locals remembered men in uniform surveying the hill at night, dragging heavy equipment to the summit. The government claimed they were testing radar. But villagers swore that strange lights glowed above the tower, shimmering as if the air itself were being torn open. Some claimed they heard chanting, not in English, but in a tongue older than any they knew. After the war, files related to Glastonbury Tor were sealed. A few leaked decades later, heavily censored. One document referenced Operation Avalon, a classified project studying geomagnetic anomalies. Another spoke of the sleeping guardians beneath the hill. Then there were the disappearances. From the 1960s through the 1980s, hikers went missing around the Tor at a higher rate than anywhere else in Somerset. Search teams found nothing, no footprints beyond the trails, no clothing, no gear. Only one case yielded a clue, a single walking stick, left upright at the summit, as if its owner had vanished mid-step. By the 1990s, the idea that the Tor was a portal had spread beyond Britain. New age groups flocked to the hill, holding ceremonies, claiming they were preparing for Arthur's return. But not everyone believed Arthur was the one to come back. Some feared it was something else, something that Arthur had been holding back. An apocryphal text, said to have been written by monks in the 13th century, describes the Tor as a lock and Arthur as the key. The passage reads, "When the key is removed, the gate shall open, and the hollow host shall ride again." Who or what the hollow host was, no one could say. Some said Arthur's army, waiting to defend Britain. Others whispered of a darker legion, beings chained beneath the hill for centuries. In 2018, a group of geologists scanned the Tor with ground-penetrating radar. What they found shocked them. Deep beneath the summit lay hollow cavities, some stretching hundreds of feet. Officially, the report dismissed them as natural fissures. But leaked notes told a different story. The patterns looked artificial, almost like chambers carved by hand. When journalists pressed the researchers, they grew evasive. One finally admitted off-record, "It's not natural. Someone dug those spaces. Or something." And then came the most disturbing detail: the shapes detected resembled rows. Rows of figures, standing. Waiting. The legend of Arthur's return suddenly didn't feel like myth anymore. It felt like a warning. And now, those who climb the Tor at night say they sometimes hear it, the sound of distant hooves beneath the ground, beating slowly, like a heart. Not all stories about Glastonbury Tor come from dusty manuscripts or secret files. Some come from the people who lived in the shadow of the hill, people who swore they saw things that logic could never explain. Take the case of Margaret Hensley, a schoolteacher from Somerset in the 1950s. She lived in a small cottage not far from the Tor. One winter evening, she decided to walk home after a late choir practice. The moon was bright, the air sharp with frost. As she neared the path that curved around the Tor, she noticed figures, tall men, cloaked, their heads bowed. At first, she thought it was a procession, maybe monks from some forgotten order. But when she blinked, the men were gone. What chilled her most wasn't their disappearance, but the sound that lingered, a metallic clink, like swords being drawn across stone. Years later, in the 1970s, 2 college students camping near the Tor reported being awakened in the middle of the night by the sound of horses. They peered out of their tent, expecting to see riders. Instead, the field was empty, yet the sound grew louder, circling them, the ground trembling faintly with each hoofbeat. By morning, the soil around their tent was churned, as if trampled by dozens of unseen horses. Then there was the farmer, William Price, who swore until his dying day that he saw the Watchers. It happened during a foggy dawn. He was herding sheep along the lower slopes when the mist parted, revealing the summit. On it stood 6 figures, motionless, their silhouettes sharp against the gray sky. He waved, called out, but they didn't move. When the fog rolled back a moment later, the hilltop was empty. Price later told his neighbors, they weren't men. They were waiting. Local legends tie these visions to Arthur's supposed guardians, the knights who rest with him, bound to the Tor until the moment of awakening. Some say they're not ghosts, but something stranger, a kind of echo left in the fabric of the hill itself. Like a record on repeat, playing over centuries. But others believe these Watchers are not protectors at all. They are wardens, keeping something inside the Tor, not keeping intruders out. In recent years, hikers have reported a new and disturbing detail. On certain nights, when the sky is clear and the moon is high, they see not only figures but also faint lights, blue-white flames dancing along the tower's edges. One man claimed he saw symbols glowing faintly on the stones, ancient marks that pulsed like veins of fire. He fled before they vanished, but he never set foot near the hill again. For centuries, people have asked, is Arthur beneath the Tor, waiting to return? Or is Arthur the lock that keeps the darkness below from rising? If you ask those who have seen the Watchers, they'll tell you the answer is simple. They'll say the hill isn't waiting for Arthur to rise. It's waiting for something else. Something that should never be allowed to leave. And yet, with each passing decade, the Watchers are seen more often. As if the lock is loosening. By the late 20th century, Glastonbury Tor was no longer just a quiet hill with an ancient tower. It had become a magnet for seekers, mystics, historians, and thrill hunters. Every year, thousands climbed its slopes, some for the view, some for the legends, and some for reasons they couldn't quite explain. But as the crowds grew, so did the stories. One of the first documented modern cases came in 1984. A group of hikers from Bristol camped at the base of the hill after attending the Midsummer Festival. They claimed that around midnight, the ground trembled, not like an earthquake, but as if something inside the hill shifted, restless. Then came the humming. Low, deep, mechanical yet organic, it vibrated through their bones. One woman collapsed, covering her ears, screaming that voices were speaking in the hum. The group fled and never camped there again. In the 1990s, tourists began reporting strange time slips. One man described climbing the path to the tower under a bright midday sun, only to crest the hill and find himself in twilight. The tower was gone. In its place stood a ring of standing stones, moss-covered and glowing faintly. Terrified, he ran back down the hill, stumbling, and in an instant he was back, sun blazing, tower standing, as if nothing had happened. His watch showed no lost time, but he swore he had been gone for hours. Local police have their own files on the Tor, missing persons cases that never made the newspapers. In 2002, a young couple vanished while exploring the slopes. Their backpacks were found neatly placed by the path, as if they'd set them down deliberately. No trace of them was ever discovered. The only witness, a farmer on the far side of the hill, reported seeing a bright flash at the summit around the same time. He described it as lightning without thunder. Paranormal investigators began flocking to the Tor, bringing cameras, sensors, and high-tech gadgets. Many left with equipment fried or batteries drained completely dry. One group captured something chilling on film, a shadow moving across the summit that didn't match any human figure. It stretched taller than the tower itself, then vanished into the mist. But perhaps the most disturbing account came in 2017. A team of spiritual researchers claimed to have uncovered markings inside the tower, faint carvings of circles and intersecting lines that resembled both Celtic symbols and something far older. They were arranged in a spiral, like a lock. When they traced the symbols, a pulse of light moved through the stone, and the entire structure seemed to shiver. They left immediately, refusing to release their recordings. One of them later confessed in a private interview that they feared they had undone something. When pressed, she only said, "The hill isn't just history. It's a prison. And the cracks are already showing." Since then, visitors have reported hearing whispers on the wind near the tower, voices calling their names, even when they climb alone. Dogs refuse to go up the hill at night. Birds avoid it entirely after dusk. And some locals say the watchers are appearing more frequently, their forms clearer, sharper, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark. The Tor seems restless, as if something beneath is stirring. And the question that chills everyone who hears these stories is this: what happens if it wakes? For centuries, people have whispered that King Arthur never truly died. Instead, he rests somewhere between worlds, waiting for the day Britain needs him most. Some say Avalon cradles his spirit. Others insist he sleeps beneath Glastonbury Tor itself, sealed away with Guinevere, his knights, and the sword Excalibur. But lately, the legends have taken a darker turn. In 2020, on the night of the winter solstice, a group of stargazers gathered at the Tor to watch the Great Conjunction, when Jupiter and Saturn aligned for the first time in centuries. The crowd fell silent as the planets drew close in the sky, their light merging into a radiant beacon. At that exact moment, the tower on the summit seemed to glow with its own light, as though the stone was alive. Several witnesses swore they heard the sound of hooves, heavy, armored hooves, climbing the hill. Others claimed they saw a figure, cloaked and crowned, standing just inside the tower's archway, watching the stars. For a heartbeat, they said, his sword gleamed with silver fire. Then, as quickly as it appeared, the vision faded. Was it Arthur, stirring from his slumber? Or was it something far more dangerous pretending to be him? Because the old myths carry a warning. They say that if Arthur returns in the wrong age, through the wrong ritual, he may not rise as savior, but as conqueror. A king forged in light could just as easily wake in shadow. Strange events began escalating after that night. A series of unexplained storms swept across Somerset. Farmers found their fields scorched with spiral patterns, as if lightning had touched the ground in deliberate shapes. Pilgrims visiting the tour reported losing hours, sometimes even days, unable to recall what happened. And in one chilling case, a historian researching Arthurian legends vanished from his home in Glastonbury, his last journal entry reading, "The king stirs. But it may not be our king." Some scholars believe the tour is not just a burial site but a doorway, an axis mundi, where the human world touches others. And what emerges from that doorway depends on who, or what, controls the key. If Arthur is truly there, perhaps the land will heal when he awakens. But if not, then the tour may be hiding a far older power, one that has worn many names, the horned god, the winter king, the shadow in the mist. And if that being wakes first, there will be no round table. No shining knights. Only darkness, spreading out from the hill like wildfire, swallowing England and beyond. So the people of Glastonbury live with the duality of hope and dread. Tourists climb for the view, dreamers pray for Arthur's return, and skeptics laugh it all away. But at night, when the mist curls low and the tower looms like a sentinel against the stars, everyone feels the same chill in their bones. The hill is waiting. The king will rise. Hidden deep in the archives of Glastonbury Abbey is a manuscript that few have ever seen. The parchment is brittle, its ink faded, but the words are unmistakably clear. Scholars call it the final prophecy of Avalon. According to the legend, it was written by a monk who, after spending a night alone on the tour, returned raving about visions of fire, blood, and the return of a crowned figure. The prophecy begins with an image, when the twin stars meet as one, and the hill is crowned in flame, the gate will open. From the earth will rise the once and future king, or his shadow. For centuries, this riddle puzzled historians. The twin stars seemed meaningless, until the great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in 2020. Suddenly, the cryptic lines looked less like allegory and more like a countdown. The manuscript goes on to describe a choice, one that humanity would not recognize until it was too late. If the land is broken and the people divided, he will come in wrath, not mercy. The blade that once healed will strike anew, and the crown will weigh heavier than stone. But if the people remember unity, and honor the bonds of the round table, then light shall return, and with it the golden age. The troubling part is what follows. The prophecy does not guarantee salvation, it warns of a dangerous balance. Arthur's return is not destiny carved in stone but a reflection of the world he awakens into. If corruption rules, then Arthur himself may be corrupted. If the land bleeds, then he may rise not as savior but as executioner. Some modern mystics interpret this as a mirror of our own times. Wars, divisions, greed, the erosion of truth, all of it painting a world unworthy of a noble king. If Arthur awoke today, would he recognize the Britain of his legends? Or would he see only betrayal and ruin, deciding that the world deserved cleansing rather than saving? There are even whispers that the shadow mentioned in the prophecy is not Arthur at all, but Mordred, the traitor's son, cursed to rise when the stars align. In this version of the tale, it is Mordred who stirs in the hill, ready to finish what he began, the fall of Camelot, not its restoration. And yet, those who visit Glastonbury Tor still climb with hope. They light candles, they whisper prayers, they leave offerings in the cracks of the ancient tower. Perhaps they believe that the land still holds a chance to tip the scales, that the hill remembers, and that the spirits of Avalon may yet call forth the true king when the moment comes. Until then, the Tor waits in silence. Its stone tower stands against the winds of centuries, a sentinel between the living and the dead. And each night, as the mist curls around its base, one question haunts the hearts of all who dare to climb it: is the prophecy a promise of salvation, or a warning of damnation? The Tor is beautiful by day, but by night it becomes something else entirely. On the evening of October 31st, when the veil between worlds is said to be thinnest, a group of travelers decided to climb the hill. They were not locals, just curious wanderers drawn by the legends of Arthur, Avalon, and the Abbey. The villagers had warned them, never climb the Tor when the mist begins to rise, but warnings are easily ignored by those chasing a story. The night was colder than usual. The moon hung low, swollen and red like a burning coal, casting long shadows that twisted across the grass. The tower of St. Michael loomed at the top, black against the sky, its ruined arches looking more like the teeth of some ancient beast than stone left by human hands. As they ascended, the mist began to creep up from the fields below. It did not roll like ordinary fog. It coiled, it slithered, it reached. Within minutes, the world below was gone, swallowed in a pale, milky void. The hilltops seemed to float above nothingness, as though they had stepped out of time itself. One of the travelers, a woman named Claire, swore she heard whispers in the fog. Not the wind, not the rustling of leaves, but voices, low, urgent, murmuring in a language she couldn't recognize. Another man laughed nervously, saying it was just their imagination. But the longer they stood there, the clearer the voices became. The whispers spoke names. Names no one in the group recognized until one word made them all freeze. Arthur. The mist thickened, and from its depths came a sound like metal scraping on stone. The ground trembled faintly beneath their feet. The tower's shadow stretched unnaturally long, as if reaching for them. Claire pointed into the fog, her face pale. She swore she saw figures moving, tall, cloaked, their eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. Then, the chanting began. It rose out of the mist like a tide, a rhythm that seemed to come from all directions at once. The words were ancient, broken, impossible to repeat, but heavy with meaning. The travelers felt it in their bones, in the pounding of their hearts, in the shiver that ran down their spines. Suddenly, a flash of light burst across the sky. For a moment, the group thought it was lightning, but there were no clouds. It was as if the heavens themselves had torn open. And there, for just a heartbeat, they saw him, a shadow of a man in armor, crowned and carrying a blade that glowed like fire. He stood at the tower's entrance, staring down at them with hollow eyes. The vision vanished, leaving only darkness. The chanting stopped. The mist fell silent. But one traveler, Daniel, was missing. His friends called his name, searched the hilltop, circled the tower. His footprints ended at the archway of St. Michael's Tower, but he was nowhere inside. Only the stone floor, cold and empty, as though he had stepped into the wall itself. The survivors fled down the hill, stumbling through the mist, not daring to look back. When they reached the village, breathless and shaking, they told their story. The locals listened quietly, and when the travelers finished, the oldest among them simply nodded. "The hill takes who it wants," he said. "Some nights, it gives them back. Some nights, it doesn't." Daniel was never seen again. And since that night, people say the whispers on the tour have changed. Among the ancient voices, one name is new. A name spoken over and over, drifting through the mist. Daniel. Not every legend around the tour is a story from 1,000 years ago. Some are frighteningly recent. Hidden in police reports, in yellowed newspaper clippings, in whispered testimonies of locals who dare not speak too loud, there is a pattern. A record of vanishing. Of people who walked up the hill and never came back down. The first case dates back to 1892. A farmer's son, Edward Morris, was last seen walking toward the tour at twilight. He told his family he heard music, soft, distant, like flutes carried on the wind. His mother begged him not to follow it, but he laughed, saying perhaps the fair folk were calling. He never returned. His boots were found weeks later at the base of the hill, perfectly placed side by side, as if he had stepped out of them and walked barefoot into the mist. Another case in 1931, a schoolteacher named Margaret Ellis led her students on a picnic to the tour. The day was bright, the children's laughter carried on the breeze. But Margaret herself seemed distracted. She kept glancing toward the tower, as if hearing something no one else could. Witnesses recall her walking away from the group during lunch, climbing toward the ruins. By the time anyone noticed, she was gone. The children searched. The villagers searched. The police searched. Her handbag was found resting against the tower's stone wall, but no sign of her. Not then, not ever. And then, there is the most chilling account of all, from 1974. A couple from London, Mark and Elaine Carter, visited Glastonbury for the first time. They were tourists, curious about the abbey, the legends, the sacred hill. At dusk, they climbed the tour together. Only Elaine came back. She was found at the base of the hill in shock, barefoot, her clothes torn, her eyes wide and unblinking. For hours she would say nothing. When at last she spoke, her voice was faint, trembling. They took him. They came out of the stones. They called his name, and he followed. I couldn't stop him. I couldn't. When pressed, she could not describe who they were. Only that they were tall, shadow-thin, their faces hidden, and their voices, oh, their voices, sounded like 1,000 whispers inside her skull. Mark Carter was declared missing, presumed dead. His body was never recovered. The files go on. Each story eerily alike. People drawn to the tour at twilight or in the mist. A sound no one else hears. A light no one else sees. A presence no one else believes, until it is too late. And always, always, the same detail, footprints that lead toward the tower and end at its walls, as if the stones themselves had swallowed the living whole. Locals no longer doubt. They do not question. They only warn, never climb the tor when the mist is rising, and never, ever answer if you hear your name called in the wind. Because if the hill wants you, it will take you. And when the night is quiet, when the fog lies heavy on the ground, some say you can still hear the voices of the lost. They call from somewhere just beyond the veil. They are not crying for help. They are not begging for release. Legends say that Glastonbury Tor is not just a hill. It is a threshold. A doorway between this world and the next. And where there is a doorway, there must also be a guardian. For centuries, whispers have spread among monks, wanderers, and occult scholars about a presence that walks the slopes of the Tor when night falls. They do not agree on its form. Some say it is a knight clad in dark armor, faceless beneath a steel helm. Others claim it appears as a towering shadow, robed and silent, its outline flickering like smoke against the moon. And a few, those brave enough to speak after climbing at midnight, swear the guardian is not one, but many, a shifting figure, sometimes man, sometimes beast, always watching. The first written record comes from a monk in the year 1275. He described hearing a black rider patrol the summit as he prayed in the ruins of St. Michael's Chapel. The sound of hooves echoed on the stone, yet no animal was seen. When he dared to look outside, the night was clear, the hill silent. But when he lowered his gaze, his candle extinguished on its own, and in the wax of the candleholder, words had been carved, "Go no further." Later accounts grew darker. A traveler in the 1600s claimed that he saw a knight with a sword drawn, standing in front of the tower. The figure did not move, did not speak. The traveler approached, believing it to be another pilgrim. But when he reached for his shoulder to greet him, his hand passed straight through empty air. The knight dissolved into mist, leaving only the sound of a blade sliding back into its scabbard. And yet, perhaps the most haunting story comes from the Victorian era, when spiritualism was at its height. In 1887, a group of occult enthusiasts performed a séance near the Tor, hoping to call upon King Arthur himself. At midnight, as the mist crept in, they heard footsteps encircle them. Heavy, deliberate, each step closer, until the group fell silent. One man claimed he saw the silhouette of a figure with antlers upon its head, glowing faintly like embers in the fog. Another swore it was a knight with a shield marked by a dragon. The leader of the séance shouted a single word, "Avalon." And in that instant, the torches blew out. When light returned, one of their number had collapsed, stone dead, his face frozen in a look of terror. The rest fled and never spoke of it again. But what is the guardian? Is it Arthur himself, cursed to watch over the threshold of Avalon until the end of days? Some believe so. That his final rest was not rest at all, but a duty, to keep mortals from breaching the hidden gates and entering a world not meant for them. Others say it is something older, far older, from the time when the land was wild and gods walked among men. A protector of sacred ground, bound to the Tor long before the first chapel was built. The modern era has not silenced the tales. In 1998, 2 hikers reported being followed up the path at dusk. They heard footsteps behind them, heavy boots crunching the gravel. Each time they turned, the path was empty. At the summit, they set down their packs. And then, in the silence, a man's voice whispered right beside their ears, "Leave." There was no one there. Terrified, they ran. But when they returned the next day to collect their forgotten gear, the packs were gone. Only a sword, rusted and broken, lay across the stones. Local lore says the guardian is not evil. It is not malicious. It does not hunt the innocent. It is a sentinel. It is duty made flesh, or mist, or shadow. But it has no mercy. For those who wander too far, who dare to call upon what lies beneath the hill, who attempt to step through the unseen gate, the guardian is there, and it will not let them pass. And so, when the wind howls across Glastonbury Tor and the tower looms dark against the stars, the people of Somerset still remind their children. Do not climb at night. Do not call out to the stones. And if you hear footsteps that are not your own, whatever you do, do not look back. Because the guardian walks. And it has never stopped.